Hello everyone. This book is brilliant. I just walked into a bookshop, Foyles, and I saw it. It's called Monstrous Anger of the Guns: How the Global Arms Trade is Running the World and What We Can Do About It. Um, Lots of contributors, and it's actually written by or put together by something called the Peace and Justice Project. Um, Monstrous Anger of the Guns is brought to you by the Peace and Justice Project, founded by Jeremy Corbyn in 2021. We bring people together in Britain and across the world to work for social and economic justice, peace, and human rights. I learned so much from this book, and it's not an easy read actually. Parts of it nearly made me tearful because it tells you about war and the effects of war. And to try and sum the book up, firstly, it's excellently written. Lots of contributors, excellently written. Um, and some of those contributors I've never heard of before, but now I know who they are. I'll probably be reading more by them. And there's a lady in here, for example, called Lindsay German. There are people who've done a lot of really good work to try and expose and stop what's called the military-industrial complex, which is essentially how governments and the military and the economists, well, when I say the economists, neoliberals, basically all work hand in hand. The idea being to create as much wealth as possible at the expense of human lives. Human lives be fucked, they're all getting rich. And how governments have been duped by this whole philosophy into spending more and more and more and more on weapons and less and less and less and less on actually solving problems or improving the lives of citizens. And there's some things in there I absolutely didn't know. Some really interesting facts, like the fact that India is the second most armed nation on earth after the US. There are 7 million plus licensed arms weapons holders in India. And India, if you follow the news, has been run by basically a fascist government. Um, a government that modelled itself on the Nazi Party, Modi's government, for a long time now. So there are lots of lynchings, lots of killings, lots of gun violence. Also, very interestingly, in India, why have I never heard of this? People are thinking because the media is not going to tell you, because the UK likes India, or the West likes India, and they've got a lot in common. That's why you always see a lot of Indians celebrating every time Israel steps up its ethnic cleansing. Go Israel, and all these morons. There are actually shrines to Hitler in India. Why is that relevant? Because Zionism is basically a form of fascism. Um, so anyway, getting back to the point, India is the second most armed nation on earth. The security forces there, who are completely corrupt anyway. It doesn't matter what you do. If you're a high class Hindu, you can rape, murder, whatever. Um, but if you're anyone else, you're fucked. Yeah, they have about 3 million guns, and actual legally registered people have about 7 million guns. So there's a problem there. India is also the world's largest importer of weapons, believe it or not. Um, Palestine is really, really useful for the defense industry, especially Elbit systems, which um, has suffered some defeats. In the UK, they've had to shut down factories, they've had to close factories. That's because of the work of some of the people who are written about in this book. So there is hope, not much hope. When there's money to be made, fuck it, your life doesn't matter. Nobody's does. There's money to be made, and the neoliberals will make sure they keep making it, and the arms trade will make sure it keeps being made. Um, after the Getting back to Palestine, it's basically a weapons testing factory, and then Elbit can sell all its weapons and say battle tested. Basically, we used them on civilians. Um, but that tide's turning. I went into it was actually another Foyles bookshop, and the number of recommended books I saw about Palestine by Palestinian writers, I've never seen that many before. There were between 5 and 10, all on the display tables at the front. Bookstores do not display books on the front tables unless they know there's an interest in those books. So people are learning about this. Maybe they'll have killed 200,000 Palestinians by the time anything happens. And Israel's been desperate to take anybody on its borders to war for ages. Obviously, what they're doing in Lebanon right now, you murder people in Iran, you bomb embassies in Syria, and eventually, Iran was actually very patient about it, but eventually Hezbollah's come back. Why does Hezbollah exist, by the way? They were formed in the 80s when Israel was bombing the hell out of Lebanon because some Palestinians they hadn't managed to murder had rushed to Lebanon. And they thought, fuck it, we'll invade Lebanon as well and get some more land. We can kill these fuckers at last. Except Hezbollah was formed, and it's the only group ever to have successfully pushed back an Israeli invasion. So they hate Hezbollah. Hamas didn't exist before 2006 either, I think. But Hamas is the reason for all the world's evils. Getting back to the book. So Palestine is a weapons testing ground. Here's something else I didn't know. Hawaii was annexed by the US in the late 1800s, 1890 something. And ever since then, it's basically been used as a weapons testing ground. They hold RIMPAC there every 2 years, the world's biggest weapon fair. They get rid of all the indigenous population. They bomb the shit out the oceans. They have military bases there. It's basically they're a fortress for the US empire. Whenever there's wars in the Middle East or wherever, they ship all the weapons through there. But there's a group in Hawaii who actually forced the shutdown of something called the Red Hill storage facility, where they store tons and tons of fuel for their war machines, which has leaked into the ocean and poisoned 100,000 or so Hawaiians. They don't give a shit. So Hawaii for America is basically like Palestine for these European Zionists, Israel. Really interesting stuff in here. The government is basically controlled by the arms industry. Dick Cheney was paid tens of millions, for getting Iraq invaded, for going with that. After the Cold War, they needed a boogeyman, right? So 9/11 attacks, perfect. Now we can have a forever war against terror. The arms industry is making money faster than it's ever made it. They want the fucking war in Israel to end. They don't want any wars to end because it's making them tons of money, more than ever. The arms industry is also the world's biggest polluter. Surprise, surprise, right? And what they do is there was something called the ATT, the International Arms Trade Treaty, which would have maybe tracked some of the arms trade and controlled it, but there's too much money in the arms trade, so they just bought off all the governments and watered it down so much that it's ineffective, completely ineffective. But it's not entirely hopeless, which was a breath of fresh air. I've got to say, I've got a good friend who doesn't particularly like Jeremy Corbyn because he thinks he's too black or white, too binary. That means something else now. Sorry if you ever watched this, Jeremy. I didn't mean to call you binary. It's just an either or. I think he's brilliant, and he's an incredibly good writer as well. Probably the politician more than any other politician alive today. Maybe, Gordon Brown's close, who actually gives a shit about the world. Certainly in the UK anyway. I think it's brilliant, which is why the establishment fucking hates him, because he wants the people to do well, not the elites. But really, really amazing book, this. The global arms trade, how it works and how we might control it. Yes, there's stuff about litigation, the human cost of arms trade in Gaza. They talk about Yemen, the UK getting rich and Germany getting rich and US getting rich out of supplying weapons to the Saudis, who are obviously committing war crimes. They have been for ages, since 2014. But who gives a fuck? The arms trade is getting rich. The government's getting a bit richer. The elites are getting richer. And anyway, they're African, so we can kill them all, can't we? Yeah? It's anyway, really, really great book. Brilliant book. 10 out of 10. I might even read it again. It's not pleasant reading for sure, but I might read it again. There's so many massacres going on. And because if people are killing each other, then the arms trade's making money. Yeah? What's the other one in there that really surprised me? Nigeria should be fantastically rich, but basically the oil companies are in there stealing all the oil. The arms companies are making a killing selling weapons to the government because, basically suppress the population, right? You shoot the fuckers if they try and get any money for all the work they do on the oil rigs. And you'll get rich and we'll get rich, and everybody else stays really poor. And it's like a neoliberal system, so some people get really rich and everyone else is getting poorer. Sound like the UK or the US, anyone? Oh yeah, in the US, how many homeless people are there, and yet they continue sending billions of pounds worth of bombs, dollars worth of bombs to Israel? It's all fucked up, isn't it? It'll make a bit more sense if you read this book. Boy, there's a lot of swearing in this review. I do apologise. And militaries in Western nations, industrialized nations, basically imperialist nations, have grown up to protect the country and advance imperialism. Militaries in colonized nations have basically grown up with the help of the imperialist nations to keep the people under control. So that's explained in here as well. It joins a lot of dots and definitely worth reading. So it's the monstrous anger of the guns, how the global arms trade is ruining the world, and what we can do about it. With Jeremy Corbyn, great writer. There's something else in there. I hadn't heard this before. I thought it was quite good. What passing bells for those who die as cattle? Only the monstrous anger of the guns. And that's from Wilfred Owen, Anthem for the Doomed Youth. Sorry, Anthem for Doomed Youth. I'm going to read another one now, and I'll review that for you as well.